What's up, y'all? My name is Jesse with Greatt Builds, and in today's video I'm going to be building a Minecraft crafting table, but in real life. My son loves Minecraft, so I decided to attempt to build him this to use as a nightstand for his bedroom. The materials I used for this is some plywood, 1x2 and 1x3 strips, cedar pickets, and a sheet of 1/8 inch thick plywood to use for the more detailed portions of this build. I start off by cutting down some of my plywood sheets to create a box to use as the base for this whole project. Once the sheets are cut, I applied some wood glue and nailed each piece together with some brad nails. I'll be sure to put a cut list shortly, as some of my cuts weren't exactly accurate while I was filming this video. But it's all good because most of the frame will be covered with either trim or some sort of detailed piece. Remember to be careful when moving this build around, as it does start to get a bit heavy as you go along. Since I had a miscut, I just used a scrap piece of wood to fill in the gap, and all was good in the end. Once the box was complete, I stained it with a Varathane Kona stain to give the first layer a darker tone, as it seemed to match the actual game's crafting table. The corners don't need to be perfectly stained, as they will be covered up with trim later on. Once the box was stained, I started to cut down my 1x2 and 1x3 strips. Refer to the cut list from earlier for the exact measurements, but also take some measurements of your own to make sure your trim lines up correctly. For the trim, I painted them jet black, again to match the in-game version. Next, I grabbed some cedar fence pickets to cut them down to size. These will be for the slats on the side of the box. Once they were all cut, I got my sander with 180 grit sandpaper and smoothed out one side of every board. Now that they're all sanded smooth, I got some frog tape to tape out some rectangles all over each board. This will help give the slats a more pixelated look to go along with the Minecraft theme. For the stain, I went with a walnut shade as I didn't want these to be too dark and stand out a little better. Now let's get back to the box. I grabbed the 1x2 trim pieces and started to attach them on the corners of the box. Once two sides of the trim were up, I grabbed the picket slats and started to attach them in between the trim pieces. I put a slat on both the top and the bottom first, then spaced the two center pickets about 1 1/4 inch apart. Then I just repeated this process for all of the sides of this crafting table. Once all the slats were installed, I got my 1x3 trim and had a 50-degree bevel cut on top and placed it in the center of each side. Be sure to use a square to help this board stay as straight as possible. Again, I repeated this step on all of the sides. Now here's the fun part, cutting out the detailed parts to match the game design for the top of the crafting table. I got my 1/8 inch sheet of plywood and got the rough dimensions of the box so that it lines up perfectly when I install it. Once I got my square cut out, I measured 7 inches from each side, then got a scrap piece and cut out a 1.5 by 1.5 inch cube to help trace out the details. For this step, I used a marker, square, and that little square that I just cut out to help cut out a staircase going from one 7-inch mark to the other and repeated this on all 4 corners. To cut these out, I used my jigsaw with a fine cut blade to avoid as much tear out as possible. Once that apron was cut out, next was the 9 square piece that goes on top of the crafting table. This part wasn't too hard to make, but just a bit time consuming getting all the measurements and cuts out of this piece. But after I had all my lines traced out, I used a DeWalt circular saw and basically did a plunge cut on each line to cut out the squares. I didn't want to bore you with watching me paint, but I painted the apron with an orangish brown color to try and match the actual design, as well as painting all the other accents black. Instead of trying to paint the border pixels along the apron, I decided to cut out some more 1.5 by 1.5 squares and painted them black and nailed them along the border that I cut out. Once they were attached, the Minecraft crafting table was complete. Be sure to leave a comment in this video if you plan to try and make this on your own, and also don't forget to send me some pictures to my Instagram. I really appreciate you watching this video, and if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and liking this video, as I will be uploading a lot more fun beginner DIY videos as well as a bunch more reviews. Thanks again for watching, take care.